landscapes. I'm an artist exhibiting in the current show, and I come to Parkland and Garrett's Gallery as a former resident of Illinois. I grew up in Central Illinois. I schooled at University of Illinois, and I subsequently have lived in New York in large measure most of my adult years. And I come to this show having a friend who happened to be a friend of Peg Shaw, who is the curator. I'm very pleased to be in the show with so many other good artists and good art. The process for selecting the works that are exhibited in the show is such that I made available the options, and Peg Shaw, the curator, chose those works which she thought were a good fit for the exhibit. There are 4 works represented by me, and the 2 of the older works in the show are these 2, which represent 2 of the first 6 or 7 works in a series that initiated in 2013 that I refer to as Dutch Masters for obvious reasons. Prior to this series, I had been doing, in large measure, works that were figurative based, essentially portraits. And one of the challenges of doing that was an increasing demand by dealers and just collectors in general for more recognizable subjects. It's a dilemma that a lot of young artists have, which is to say that it can be more difficult to sell a work that is a subject that is not known to anyone. And so in a call and resistance to creating works with celebrity subjects, the idea came to me to make the subject of the work Dutch master paintings, as opposed to the aristocrats that are represented in the paintings. The celebrity, if you will, became the iconic nature of Dutch master paintings, which are recognizable to many. The first subject that I chose happened to be a painting by Rembrandt, and again, because they were aristocrats, there is considerable information to be known about the subjects. And so, as was the case with the works prior, I set about doing information gathering and research, trying to better understand the composition and life composition of the subjects of the work. Atypical to earlier works that were more portrait-based, these works are deconstructions of paintings of the subject. So where I once would take photographs or work with existing photographs of a subject, in this case, I'm making prints, multiple prints of high-resolution scans of the paintings. I'm also incorporating actual photographs that might be taken in the gallery, the museums rather, that were exhibiting these works. And the photographic aspect, which ties to the photographic curatorial theme of the show, would be that in these works, I am also incorporating photographs that I've taken, though they are very subordinate to the paintings that are largely what you see in the figure. I will, for example, take photographs of hands and skin on face, and I will mix and match contemporary photography with existing prints of the subjects. Consistent in these works and the other works is this idea of parts to a whole, the whole being the individual subject, in these cases portraits of individuals, the parts being what I at some point referred to as biographical DNA, which is the idea of collecting both information for the subjects, but also collecting everything from like human hair to fingernails to perfume vials of breath to tears to fingerprints. And the idea there is from a portrait perspective, to move away from the surface of what and focus more on the depth of the subject. What is common to these works to the overall body of work are a few things. One of which is that I work figuratively, even though I may be abstracting the figure, even though the figure may be portraiture, it may be landscape, it may be still life. The idea is that I'm taking, in general, a singular subject and I'm breaking it down into multiple parts. Those parts then come back in circular fashion to comprise the individual subject, so hence the parts to a whole. I would say that the other commonality through most all of my work is that I'm incorporating a pseudoscientific metaphor, and so I'm asking the viewer to see the work through a lens that is encouraging one to read it in, again, pseudoscientific terms, whether it's entomological, chemistry, taxonomy. I'm taking creative license and using materials and methods that suggest something that's more factual in many cases than it actually is, and hence the creative license, and hence the pseudoscientific. I'm identifying as a collage artist, and these works represent collage, though I think the proprietary quality of the work is the dimensionality, and so in incorporating these like entomological elements is the most obvious through insect pens, that I'm creating depth in the work, and in doing so I'm encouraging different readings of the work from different positions. The work moves as you move. Also the underpinnings of elements are such that you're going to see different things from different angles. And that is that parallels the experience that we have with people, with landscape, with things, and that is to say that context matters, perspective matters in terms of our reading. In works such as this, where there's only so much that can be known, and what is known is evident. I mean, this particular subject, Joachim, is known to have been an admiral in the Navy. Was the owner of the most famous bar in Holland, and was his wife and some of his family was also known. So where I could find elements that literally connect to that, I do, and they're in the work. Where I can, I apply creative license. And examples of that could be seen in I could see a range of things. I see gunpowder. I see my own baby tooth. I see sand that would have been suggested from European sands, tea and coffee. There are drink swords, olive spears, if you will, that I've painted gold in reference to the original painting in which the subject actually dons a sword at side. These would be examples of my, not just a creative license, but imagining the subjects in ways that I'm presenting a fuller picture of them. The same could be true for more contemporary works. This piece was done some years after these. This is a photograph that I took of an individual, and since that individual is alive and known to me, there was much that I could ask and subsequently know about them. And so in this particular case, I start with an information audit, and I ask questions about age and height and previous addresses. Might range from anything from hobby interests to familial details. And then I subsequently create a portrait, in this case, where the composition of the portrait also says something about the subject of the portrait. The process of making this work would start then with me taking photographs of the subject, and then me taking secondary photographs as well. So I would, for example, take photographs of in the house of objects of particular interest to them. I would take photographs of the area surrounding the house. I would then proceed to gather information specific to the subject, such as partially smoked cigars, soil from plants on the terrace of his property that's coveted, cigar bands, fabric samples from clothes, photographs that I've collected from him from earlier years. And then in this particular case, I'm referencing in some measure shelves that would suggest chemistry shelves, also creating some ambiguity with, in my mind, maybe it could be read as medicine cabinet as well, or to further create kind of ambiguity and options, if you will, for reading the work. The cabinet of curiosities in general, which is a pervasive theme among, I think, most of my work. So this is the fourth piece in the exhibit, and this is more recent work, and this too is a portrait that is photographic based, but atypical to most of my work. I didn't actually take the photograph. In this particular case, this was a commercial commission from Tokyo, and what I did on this particular piece is simply provide art direction for someone else to take the photograph, which is what I've done a few times prior. And then what I will do is take additional photographs again and incorporate them into the work, sort of skin grafting, if you will, to infuse some kind of studio spirit, into the work. In this particular case, I was given a direction for the work, which was product-oriented. And so what I did was find ways in which to break down the product and incorporate individual elements associated with the product, which happened to be a skincare product. And so the particulars of the product became the details of the subject. So in other words, I swapped out aspects of the human for aspects of the product. And since the product was touting all sorts of natural elements, a lot of which were botanical, then you see everything from tree bark to twigs, driftwood, human hair. I can see rice paper, chicken bones. So the idea is natural, the idea is recycling, and the idea was that those things were in connection to human use. And so the portrait then became a portrait of product and a portrait of the Japanese model.
You're watching For Art's Sake.
For art's sake.
For art's sake.
For art's sake.
Step inside a world of creativity
This is an interactive piece.
Tally-type processes that I've worked with.
where every piece tells a story.
Consistent in these works is this idea of parts to a whole.
When we saw the interaction between the students and the veterans, we realized that we needed to do more.
That's what we do.
Experience Gert's Gallery and hear from the artists themselves on For Art's Sake, only on PCTV.
I'm Constance Edwards Scopolidis, and I have a studio based in Indianapolis, Indiana. I studied art at Indiana University and then moved to the East Coast and ended up being so lucky to study with a famous American painter named Isabel Bishop. She was a figurative painter. When I met her, she was already 80 years old, but she was so vital and so inspiring for me as a 22-year-old. I went on to work on large-scale figurative paintings Well, now, at this stage in my career, I've expanded away from what I would call straight ahead jazz painting, which is what you see is what you get. Now I'm working with more subtle imagery and messaging. A lot of it is political. For example, I'm standing in front of a piece that was inspired by the death of Trayvon Martin. So Trayvon's hoodie obscured his face a little too much, and it frightened poor George Zimmerman into literally murdering this child. So I've done a lot of work based on gun policy, the lack of gun policy reform, frankly. But to get down to the nitty-gritty, I'm working with original drawings. Everyone understands what a drawing is. No matter if you're an artist or not, or how old you are, everybody understands a pencil point and a piece of blank paper. So the purity of drawing is the way I start all of my projects. So I have drawn this hoodie first, and then I've expanded into lenticular photographic prints. And what that means is there are computer programs that will depth map my artwork, including my grabbed and stolen images from the web and from the emojis even off of your iPhone. And I am placing all of the imagery into deep, deep layers. Now on the video, it may be flattening out this artwork. This artwork is very difficult to photograph. If you do a still photo, a lenticular, as deep as it can be, will go completely flat. Maybe the video is working. We'll have to see. But yeah, why can't someone emerge from behind a hoodie exploding with innocence, happiness, and flower power? So when I was choosing the flowers that I specifically wanted to use in this piece, I went into the public domain of art historical artists. So for example, I'm not even sure who the artist would have been, but the Dutch tulip flowers go way, way back in the 1700s. And so you'll see some Dutch tulips. I pulled this from the emoji iPhone. This is from the emoji iPhone. The Van Gogh sunflowers are here. Let's see, Murakami. Now I will explain that when I steal, because Warhol made it famous, artists are supposed to steal. That's what we do. I had to alter somewhat the actual artist's flowers. Otherwise, it truly can be a lawsuit. So I changed the face. Murakami has more of a have a happy day face, so I kind of made it a drunken face. The Warhol's poppies, the Warhol Foundation is really going to come after you, so you have to be careful how you use anything from Warhol. So I simply put a spiral in the center. There's Georgia O'Keeffe must be in there somewhere. Jeff Koons is peeking out here. Oh, Frida Kahlo is some of this gentle flowers here. And these flowers, for example, anything that's violet or blue actually came from Kehinde Wiley's background to Obama's portrait that's in the Smithsonian. So there's a crass saying in the art world that's sadly true, which is bigger is better. And so in the art fair world that I participate in New York and Miami especially, some of the biggest artwork gets the most attention, whether it's quality or not. A piece like this, I wanted it to look almost sacred or church-like, which is why I chose white for the frame, but I also wanted it to be Baroque ornate as a juxtaposition to the sharp contemporary look of the actual imagery. This is today. This is somewhat old world. This frame was a nightmare for my framers because it actually was a mirror So we had to take the mirror out of the frame without breaking the frame, and then build an armature behind it to keep the artwork in place. So a little bit of a risk, but so far, so good. A piece like this, in its stillness, may not attract a viewer, but if you're prompted and you know what you're looking at, you are allowed to touch the art, which is such a no-no in our world. You know, we're trained, never touch art. But this is an interactive piece that you can participate in and move the imagery and reveal imagery that is, I'm hoping, is somewhat of a surprise, and maybe a nice surprise. Who in the world does not like flowers? And this character, I'll talk a little bit about a series of drawings that I started doing in 2014, and they were elaborate, hooded, shrouded figures who were finger pointing, and it had to do with blame. So the initial drawing was called Blame and Fault in America. It's really based on the lack of gun policy reform, how we just continue to see violence that it only gets thoughts and prayers. So this is a big inspiration for me. So I've done quite a few drawings of these figures who are pointing at something. I want people to think, what are these messengers? What are these entities, these beings? You know it's a person because it's defined by just enough. What are they pointing your attention to? So bottom line, I want people to think about, can we go further than thoughts and prayers? These two pieces are also examples of my lenticular photography. They start with an original drawing, just pencil on paper, and then I find a way. These iterations, I call them, are lenticular photography, but I also can turn these into, the imagery anyway, into interactive works. They can turn into video ideas. I use whatever technology I can to get a point across. So this one in particular was inspired by COVID, when everyone in America was fighting over the fact that we were being mandated to wear masks. Everybody was so upset. Their rights were just so infringed upon because they had to wear a mask. Yet, everyone was sleeping at night with all of their iPhones, their iPads, their Alexas, their Googles, which is spyware in my opinion. So let's say you have a dream and you're talking to yourself, talking out loud in a dream. Alexa is deciding to show you ads for the products you might have been talking about the next day. So this is, Alexa cannot deliver this. She can't deliver you the world and the galaxy and the planets. She probably can deliver everything else. All right, so this piece was inspired by our political turmoil. Is anybody really paying attention to what's rolling down through our streets? Are we paying attention? Because some things are going to happen, like women's rights are really going to be, and nobody wanted to believe it, and okay, I can go off on a tangent, but this character is shrouded with a barrier to their senses. This specifically, the character, the figure cannot smell anything. And the saying of wake up and smell the coffee is what this is about. This is called Heads Up. I've got all the coffee, the biscotti, and smell the roses. There's a thing about, can you pause long enough in your life to realize that there is a scent in the air? But this poor character is going to miss it all, and life is just going to rumble up on him, I think. In this piece, because I was working with a color theme, like I wanted it to mostly be kind of loosely a black, white, and red theme, and so it was obvious that I could use wake up and smell the flowers, for example. They could all be red roses. But with coffee, coffee beans are brown and they're dark, and I thought, let me start looking at iconic coffee brands. And it is reminiscent of how Warhol would use an iconic, everyday visual image. I mean, of course, that Campbell's soup can. Everybody bought Campbell's soup, everybody ate it, and he elevated it into some kind of iconic visual. So I was looking for that vibe, and I also needed to find red. So in my search about coffee, Folgers has always been in a red can or a red tumbler, and the French Ely has, their logo is in red. So I did have to pay for some license rights to use those images. I'm not so convinced that the art police are everywhere and that they would ever catch up to me, but sometimes I just want to do things right so I don't have a hassle.